The ocean is quiet. The wind fills the sails. A wooden ship cuts through dark blue water, carrying cargo that once changed the fate of nations. Not gold, not silver, but spices. Tiny seeds and dried bark that were once worth more than treasure. For thousands of years, ships like this crossed dangerous oceans to carry cinnamon, pepper, cloves, and nutmeg across the world. Empires rose because of them. Wars were fought over them. Explorers risked their lives chasing them. And these journeys created one of the most fascinating maritime networks in history. The ancient spice trade routes. Welcome to Travel and Cruise. Today we sail back in time, following the legendary sea lanes that connected Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Europe long before modern maps existed. Long before cargo ships and cruise liners dominated the seas, merchants relied on wooden vessels powered by wind and courage. These ships were not luxury liners. They were survival machines. Their crews were traders, sailors, navigators, and sometimes adventurers who knew the ocean could either make them rich or swallow them whole. The story begins thousands of years ago in the lush islands of Southeast Asia, in a region today known as the Maluku Islands of Indonesia. These islands were the only place on Earth where certain spices grew naturally: cloves, nutmeg, mace. Small plants that grew quietly in tropical forests held enormous power in the ancient world. In Europe and the Middle East, spices were rare and mysterious. People believed they had magical and medicinal powers. Pepper was used to preserve food. Cinnamon was burned in religious rituals. Nutmeg was believed to protect against disease. A handful of spices could cost as much as a week's wages. Because of that value, merchants built vast trade networks stretching thousands of miles across land and sea. But spices did not travel alone. Along with them came ideas, religions, languages, and cultures. The spice routes were not just trade lanes. They were bridges between civilizations. Arab sailors were among the first great masters of these sea routes. For centuries, they sailed across the Indian Ocean using knowledge of seasonal monsoon winds. When the winds blew east, they sailed toward India and Southeast Asia. When the winds shifted west, they returned to ports in Arabia and East Africa. These predictable winds turned the Indian Ocean into a natural maritime highway. Arab ships known as dhows carried spices, silk, ivory, and precious stones across these waters. Their triangular sails allowed them to move efficiently even in changing winds. Aboard, the crews navigated using the stars, the color of the water, and even the flight patterns of birds. There were no GPS systems, no radar, only skill, instinct, and centuries of accumulated knowledge. As these ships moved between ports, they connected great trading cities. Calicut in India became one of the busiest spice ports in the world. Merchants from Persia, Arabia, and Africa crowded its docks. Further west, the city of Aden at the entrance of the Red Sea became a gateway between the Indian Ocean and the Mediterranean. In East Africa, ports like Zanzibar welcomed ships carrying spices and fabrics while sending back gold, ivory, and timber. These ports were alive with languages and cultures from every direction. A sailor stepping onto a dock might hear Arabic, Persian, Swahili, Tamil, and Malay all within a few minutes. Markets were filled with color and energy. The air carried the powerful scent of spices, cinnamon, cloves, cardamom. For travelers arriving from distant lands, these ports felt like the center of the world. Yet the most valuable spices were still thousands of miles away, deep within the Indonesian archipelago. Reaching those islands required navigating narrow channels, coral reefs, and unpredictable tropical storms. The sailors who made that journey became legends. Chinese traders also played an important role in this network. Massive Chinese treasure ships sailed across the Indian Ocean under the command of the famous Admiral Zheng He. These ships were enormous for their time, some reportedly longer than modern football fields. They carried silk, porcelain, and tea, exchanging them for spices, exotic animals, and rare goods from across Asia and Africa. Zheng He's voyages helped strengthen diplomatic and trade relationships across the region, further expanding the influence of the spice routes. For centuries, this vast trade system operated mostly under the control of Arab, Indian, and Asian merchants. Europe remained on the distant edge of this network. European traders wanted spices desperately, but they had to buy them through middlemen in Mediterranean markets like Venice. By the time spices reached Europe, their price had increased many times. Pepper could be worth its weight in silver. Kings and merchants began asking a dangerous question. What if there was a direct sea route to the source? That question launched one of the greatest eras of exploration in human history. In the late 1400s, Portuguese explorers began sailing down the coast of Africa, searching for a way to reach the Indian Ocean. Their ships were smaller and faster than traditional cargo vessels. They carried cannons, and they were determined. In 1498, the Portuguese explorer Vasco da Gama finally reached India by sailing around the southern tip of Africa. For the first time, a European fleet had discovered a direct sea route into the heart of the spice trade. This changed everything. Within years, Portuguese fleets began appearing across the Indian Ocean. They built fortified ports and attempted to control the flow of spices by force. Soon, other European powers joined the race. Dutch arrived with powerful trading companies backed by massive financial resources. Dutch East India Company became one of the richest corporations in history. Their goal was simple: control the spice supply. They focused heavily on the Indonesian islands where nutmeg and cloves grew naturally. At times, their control became ruthless. Entire islands were seized to secure monopoly over valuable crops. Meanwhile, the British East India Company expanded across India and other parts of Asia, building its own trade empire. Suddenly, the ancient spice routes became the center of global competition. Ships carrying spices now cross not only the Indian Ocean but the Atlantic as well. Ports like Amsterdam and London became major spice distribution centers for Europe. But despite the political struggles and economic rivalries, the sea routes themselves remained as beautiful and powerful as ever. Picture a tall wooden ship sailing at sunrise across calm Indian Ocean waters. The sky slowly turns from deep purple to glowing gold. Seabirds circle above. The crew begins another day at sea. They adjust the sails, check the cargo, and prepare for whatever the ocean might bring. Weeks at sea tested every sailor's strength. Storms could appear without warning. Waves as tall as buildings crashed over the deck. Food supplies had to last for months. Fresh water was precious, yet these sailors kept moving forward because the reward waiting at the end of the journey could change their lives forever. One successful voyage could make a merchant incredibly wealthy. A cargo hold filled with pepper, cinnamon, or cloves could finance entire fleets. That promise of opportunity drove generations of sailors to risk everything. But the spice trade did more than create wealth. It shaped the modern world. Cities grew around the trade routes. New cultures blended together in coastal ports. Foods changed as spices traveled across continents. Dishes that Americans enjoy today, Ike's cinnamon desserts, capper-seasoned meats, and nutmeg-flavored drinks exist because of these ancient maritime journeys. Even the modern cruise routes through the Indian Ocean and Southeast Asia often follow paths first traveled by those early spice traders. When a cruise ship sails through the Strait of Malacca today, it moves through one of the busiest shipping lanes in the world. But centuries ago, that same narrow stretch of water guided spice fleets carrying fortunes across the ocean. Standing on the deck of a ship there today, it's easy to feel the echoes of that history. The same winds still blow across the water. The same islands rise from the horizon. The same ocean that carried the dreams of merchants and explorers continues to connect continents. And that's the magic of maritime history. Every wave carries a story. Every harbor holds centuries of memories. The spice routes were not just about trade. They were about discovery. They brought distant cultures closer together and opened the world in ways people had never experienced before. Today, the spices that once drove global exploration sit quietly on kitchen shelves. Pepper grinders, cinnamon jars, nutmeg containers, simple, everyday items. But each of them carries a hidden story of storms, sailors, exploration, and adventure across thousands of miles of ocean. Next time you smell cinnamon or taste black pepper, remember that those flavors once traveled across the most dangerous waters on Earth. They crossed deserts, sailed through storms, and passed through dozens of hands before reaching their final destination. And behind every grain of spice, there was a ship, a crew, and a journey across the ancient spice trade routes. Thank you for sailing through history with Travel & Cruise. If you enjoy exploring the world's greatest sea routes, hidden travel history, and incredible maritime stories, make sure you subscribe to the channel and join us for the next adventure. Because the oceans still hold countless stories waiting to be discovered, and the next voyage is already on the horizon. Thanks for watching.